Hey guys, listen up.
This is the SEC Insider Hit, powered by Miss Kelly Furniture, Mississippi's number one sleep store.
We'll talk to Tom Luginbill about how and why Kirby Smart runs college football now. And he's taken that away from the mighty Nick Saban and Alabama Crimson Tide. We are the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Brought to you by American-made Tito's Vodka, Briarwood Wine and Spirits. Pick up some Tito's Vodka for the weekend. Please drink responsibly. Show is also presented by Fleetway Market with over 25 locations in Mississippi. Fuel up at Fleetway Market. Don't forget about the Market Cafe in Gluckstadt. This is ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Our guests join us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. This is Kirby Smart explaining why they've dominated college football.
We have a saying around our place, we eat off the floor. And if you're willing to eat off the floor, you can be special.
Tom, why do you think Alabama's not willing to eat off the floor?
Oh, Alabama's willing to eat off the floor. Let me tell you what happened, though, is when Kirby got to Georgia, every corner he looked around, something wasn't happening that was happening at Alabama. So he had to go in there and say, hey, guys, Alabama's got this. Clemson's got this. We had this at Alabama. We had that at Alabama. You want to beat Alabama, you got to play with the same deck of cards. And at the end of the day, that's ultimately what it came down to. I mean, we're talking about manpower, staffing, recruiting budget, facilities upgrades, all kinds of stuff that was lacking at a place like Georgia, and you'd say, no way. How can that be? How can that be? But it was. Now it's not now. So now that they've got all of those sorts of things, they can compete with anybody in the land. And when he says we got to be willing to eat off the floor, essentially what he's saying is you got to be that hungry, right? You have to be that starved for success to be willing to eat off the floor.
And can he keep it going after two shiny national championship rings? Can they keep the edge in the offseason? Saban's fought that for the last 14 years or so. Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. I also think that Saban went too far on the offensive side of the football, Tom. I very much understand what he did with Kiffin and Sark, and it was the right move to a certain extent. But what you have to tip your cap to with Kirby is he's playing 2011 Alabama football, and he's playing it and winning championships. They're still smash mouth football with the ability to play action and get you downfield after they wear you down.
Yeah.
And he also rests his defense more. I just wonder if they tuned up that offense too much and went away, because Alabama no longer has a dominant running game, and Georgia does, Luke.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Alabama kind of had to play to their personnel, particularly last year. And the personnel the last 2 years, the personnel told them that were better in the passing game than they were in the run game. So let's focus on that. So how do you fix that? How do you get back to that? I think it's through recruiting. And listen, everybody's going to miss in recruiting, even Alabama, okay? They're going to miss too. Georgia's going to miss. The best of the best are going to miss. But there after Evan Neal departed from Alabama, that's when you started to kind of see that they weren't quite the same football team up front. Right, they didn't have the same depth, they didn't have the same quality of play, and I think it took away from their overall physicality in terms of, to your point, what their demeanor is, or what they want it to be, or what it had been since Nick Saban arrived there. And they've got to get back to that. Now, I will say this: I think there will be hyper focus on the run game, particularly early, because they've got to break in a new quarterback, and the same could be said for Georgia.
I would think Tommy Rees is going to go with just a little bit more smash mouth approach. I mean, I think Saban gets that they went away from it, and Kirby embraced it and said, no, we're going to still win like the 2011 way, which I think is brilliant in the end, even though it's not as high-flying and fun as the Kiffin Sark stuff and maybe Kirby, because he was there, realized, hey, man, you can't run my defense like this. And it's fun to always want to score in 3 plays, but we're gonna grind it out some so that in the fourth quarter we've just absolutely physically whipped you. Your thoughts?
Well, I think the one counter to that would be Georgia has not been dynamic in any way, shape, or form at quarterback under Kirby Smart.
No doubt.
And the last 2 to 3 iterations of Alabama, they've been really dynamic. So that in and of itself changes your philosophy, right? That part of it puts you in a position where you know you can do some things on offense that a Jake Fromm is never going to be able to do. So I think that's part of. I think that's part of it too.
Okay, hang
now,
on.
Think about this.
Let me jump in. But what does that say, Luke's, when the most talented quarterback, in my opinion, that Alabama's ever had, as far as throwing the football, in Bryce Young, even more so than Tua, I believe, the most talented QB couldn't win the national championship, and yet Georgia's over here winning with a walk-on that most people thought would be playing at North Central Florida Community College.
Yeah, right. That tells me that they didn't recruit the quarterback position very well. I mean, at the end of the day, your walk-ons beating out your scholarship guys. What does that tell you? And let's not forget, when they signed Justin Fields, they were coming off of a totally unexpected national championship appearance. So what are you going to do, bench Jake Fromm? I mean, give me a break. I mean, the timing of that was so bad for Georgia and for Justin Fields, and then obviously it worked out for both program and player as they parted ways. But I'll be the first one to say, and I could be way off base here, but I was not a Carson Beck fan coming out of high school. I thought Brock Vandergriff, had some ability, but he played at a really, really low level of competition at a private school. And I just wasn't. I'm curious to see what the drop off is going to be. Now, that whoever the quarterback is going to have really good players around him. I mean, that's a huge part of the success that these quarterbacks are likely going to endure, is because they're going to have personnel around them.
Right. Where I was going is it's an indictment on Alabama that they couldn't win with their most talented quarterback in the history of their program. And I think it's because they've lost that toughness. Now, I don't know if the sometimes we make too much of losing valuable people in an organization. And sometimes I think we're spot on. I don't know if losing Scott Cochran really took that edge, that toughness, that because your strength and conditioning guy spends more time than anybody else with the team.
Sure.
I don't know, but I know this. They haven't been as intimidating. They haven't been what they need to at the line of scrimmage, and they haven't been able to rip off 220 yards on the ground when they need to, especially playing really good teams. That tells me something, Luke.
I would say this, though. If Jameson Williams doesn't get hurt, that game, do you remember how that game began? Do you remember how that thing started? And Georgia could not double team Jameson Williams.
True.
And Alabama was going up and down the field on him. All of a sudden, he goes down, the whole entire game changes.
True.
And so that was a component, not to take away from Georgia, but people forget how that game started and the struggles Georgia was having on defense to match up. But, you use the term indictment, and I fair or unfair, that's the position this program has put themselves in. No matter what they do now, everything's going to be uber scrutinized, right? Over scrutinized. They're going to take undue criticism that wouldn't be applied to most programs because, and I've said this to you before, we become so conditioned to seeing a program like Alabama make it look easy that when there's one flaw or something doesn't quite go right, it's so over magnified with them way more than it is for anybody else. I mean, look at what happened to Clemson, not just 2 years ago, but last year. Do you remember when they started off? What did they start off 4-5 or no? They were 4-3 2 years ago. They ended up finishing 10-3. They're 4-3. You would have thought the end of the program, it was over. The program was done. Clemson was over. Well, does anybody, if they start off 4-3, 6 years before that, is anybody freaking out? No.
Right.
So you become a victim of your own success. And in today's climate, Bo, with social media and the access that fans and boosters and alumni and critics and the media and everybody has to voice their opinion about your program, it just, to me, it gets over magnified. Now, that's the nature of the business, but they, for all the success that an Alabama has, they also take far more criticism than they're due.
True. Tom Luginbill, ESPN on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. All right, let's switch gears to a first-year head coach, Zach Arnett. By the way, when you get to spend some time with him, I think you'll really, really like him. And I think he's made some really good moves with hires of David Turner, Will Friend, Greg Knox, veterans in the SEC. But there's going to be a learning curve. It just happens. Now, one good thing is Leach allowed him to run a huge piece of the puzzle within a big SEC program for 3 years without messing with him whatsoever. So that I think that
he
is.
Didn't want anything to do with it.
That's right. Talk about what a fourth-year quarterback starter, how that helps with Zach Arnett's transition as a first-year head coach, knowing that Will Rogers has seen it all and done it all, and he's won on the road at Auburn, he's won on the road at A&M, and he's won on the road at Ole Miss, which is pretty damn impressive at State and Ole Miss type programs.
Yeah, and I don't even know if you could really put it into words how important that is for a first-year coach. I think the greater examination is going to come when we see how vastly different the approach is offensively. And do you have the personnel to do what you want to do and be what you want to be? This is a program that didn't institute a tight end. Well, Kevin Barbet is going to have tight ends at some point, and so how quickly can the scheme get acclimated to the personnel, and can they do or be what they want to be immediately right off the bat? Or is that going to take a transfer portal cycle, a recruiting cycle or two to get some pieces of the puzzle in there? But from a launch point, when you played that much football at the quarterback position, and I understand it's the air raid, and a lot of people feel like it's overly simplified and it's very quarterback friendly and it's plug and play. But when you've seen the things that they've seen, think about how many rush 3, drop 8 they've experienced. Like, think about all the different types of windows that he's had to throw into because of the offensive system he was in. Well, what if all of a sudden the picture becomes a lot clearer for a quarterback that's seen just about everything, because now there's an attempt to run the football, you have to add more people to the box, and now the picture beyond that in the secondary isn't quite as cloudy. I think that's going to be something that he's going to be super excited about.
I do too. And I think they're bringing back some guys like Tulu and Justin Robinson, guys that they haven't had out there. Mullen did amazing things. The one thing he couldn't do is recruit wide receivers, and then Moorhead was a disaster. And then now you've got some things rolling with this new group. So having said that, as far as his, he's called plays the last 3 years. How difficult do you think, and he promoted from within a guy named Matt Brock. How difficult do you think it'll be for Zach Arnett to not get in there and call plays moving to the head coaching position, Luke's?
Oh, I don't know. I think right off the bat, when you decide you have the opportunity to become a head coach, you have a feeling inside that I'm either going to call plays or I'm not going to call plays, right? And I think that as a head coach, particularly an early first-year head coach, he's got to make sure he's got the pulse of the program, like that he's got his fingers on that he is dialed into every nook and cranny and every detail, because ultimately he's not just responsible for the defense anymore. And I think in many ways that helps you remove yourself from that urge to play call, right? Because, and this is just me, I think, there's lots of head coaches that can do it. There's some head coaches that struggle with it. But to me, at the end of the day, I think his number one priority in game, he's got to manage the game. Like, right. He's got to be that comes way before calling plays. We can call plays all we want, but timeouts versus non-timeouts. End of the quarter, end of the half. That's the thing. Personnel groupings, getting your kicking game on and off the field. I mean, there's so many things that he's going to be responsible for now that I think kind of will detach him from that maybe desire. And I could be way, way wrong, but as a first-year head coach, as a defensive guy, if you hire people that you trust and you let them coach, is he going to have input? Of course he is. That's just the nature of the business. But I bet he has input on offense, and then he's going to have input in the kicking game and in recruiting. So I think it's actually somewhat healthy sometimes to step away with that and really focus on all of the things now that you're in charge of that you never had to deal with before.
Okay, let me go to the defensive side of the football. They made this big run where they had NFL players for 10 or 11 years under Mullen, and it trickled over to Moorhead. They weren't his guys, but with Jeffrey Simmons and Montez and Jonathan Abram and so on. And then they were void of that for a couple of years. They had some DBs, but I'm talking about up front where things happen. Now, walk me through what it means for Mississippi State for the first time in at least 3 years, if not 4, for them to have Jaden Crumedy, Travion Williams,
Yep.
John Lewis. These are guys, for the first time since Willie Gay left, they actually have guys that are NFL caliber that could be, in the first 2 to 4 round picks whenever they're eligible, and what that means for a defense, Luke.
Well, it means a heck of a lot too, because 2 of the 3 guys you just mentioned there are upperclassmen, right? And have played a lot of football. So, John's just a redshirt sophomore, I believe. But I think that whether it's the transfer portal, whether it's through graduation and guys playing their extra COVID year, that's invaluable, man. I mean, you see look at what's happened in college football the last 2 to 3 years, and I think this applies to a lot of football teams. Is like as teams have gotten older because of the extra year of eligibility, like everybody's gotten better. Like it's almost like, you remember the old days where you used to redshirt everybody no matter what, and guys, they stayed for 4 or 5 years. Well, we've kind of gotten back to that a little bit because of the extra COVID year. So I think the more upperclassmen you have, like they've got, and you got you've got what, Jack Harris, Jordan Davis, both of those guys are either redshirt seniors or grad transfers.
True.
This is a really, really old group, if you will, and generally older, more experienced players make fewer mistakes and play better football.
That's true. Bookie Watson and Jet Johnson are both 5th-year guys. That's a lot of 5th-year. Jaden Crumedy, 5th-year guy.
Nathaniel Watson Purvis, redshirt senior. Jet Johnson, as you mentioned, grad guy. I mean, Deshaun Page, redshirt senior transfer. I mean,
that's a lot of.
That's an old group, man. You don't see that.
The Zach Arnett pulls you always do in the West, but a really difficult 3-game stretch of conference games. You always want to get that first conference win, period, regardless of what year you are, but especially first-year head coach, Luke. So They play LSU at home. They'll be an underdog. They go to South Carolina. They'll be an underdog. Maybe not by much, but they'll be an underdog. And then they play Bama at home.
Yeah.
And they'll be an underdog. Okay, so South Carolina plays Georgia the week before. Okay, so Mississippi State plays LSU the week before they go to Columbia. Tell me what you think about the Gamecocks and Shane Beamer in 2023 because we don't play South Carolina much. Just your thoughts there. Neither team here.
I think that he's done a really, really good job. I think they've really maximized, especially the last 3 to 4 weeks of last season, because I've never been a huge Spencer Rattler fan. But he was extremely streaky for the better part of last season. Then all of a sudden, as we know, those last 3 weeks, he looked like an entirely different guy. So I think his confidence level going in and his experience probably gives them reason for optimism. But I don't know if I think that they're a 9-win, 10-win type of team yet. I don't think they're there in recruiting. They're not playing with Georgia's guys or Alabama's guys, maybe even LSU's guys. And I don't know if they're playing with Tennessee's guys right now. And so I think they've overachieved, and I think that is a reflection of their head coach and kind of his blue-collar, pale type of approach, which comes directly from his dad.
Sure.
Focused on the details, focused on the kicking game. Every play matters, but you can't worry about the last one. Got to go on to the next one. Like all of those things that you have to be really, really good at when you take the field and you're not as talented as somebody else. That's what Mark Stoops has done such a good job. I look at South Carolina and I kind of see a similar track, a similar trajectory with now Shane did not inherit a dumpster fire like Mark did. I mean,
right.
Mark Stoops inherited a 2-10 team that was a really bad football team. But I see similarities. I see the trajectory. I see the emphasis on toughness and discipline and all those sorts of things. Because, again, if you want to beat somebody that you're quote-unquote not supposed to beat, if they got better players than you, you've heard me say this 100 times, you're going to have to play your best, and they're going to have to do something to help you, right? And I think Shane Beamer's done that. He maximized those types of situations.
Who has more talent in 2023? MSU, South Carolina, or it's a push?
Ooh, that might be a push. I think Mississippi State's got a lot more experience returning, though.
Yeah, especially like you said, at that quarterback position and the defensive side of the football.
Quarterback and the defensive front. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's big.
And I think hiring David Turner and Will Friend in the line of scrimmage, two guys that have been around the league for a long time, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
Good hires?
Great hires. And I think Will Friend is one of the better offensive line guys in college football right now.
Yeah. Auburn had a lot more explosive plays on the ground than I thought, even though they had a rough year last year. I think he did everything he could, considering everything was burning down around him. All right.
Well, yeah, and they're playing with two hands behind their back because the quarterback couldn't throw the football.
Right. Which, by the way, I think Freeze will make Ashford like 100 times better.
It's going to be fun to watch that, is it? Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch that experiment, And you know what? If Robbie Ashford comes out of this thing and rises to the occasion, that kid deserves a lot of credit, not just physically, but mentally, to withstand the scrutiny and the criticism and the downright, I guess you could say, ugliness on the internet that he was exposed to and subjected to last year. That kid's a mentally tough kid.
That's true. Who's the LSU? It just slipped my mind. Who's the LSU kid he's competing against transfer? TJ Finley.
Yeah, it's TJ Finley.
Yeah.
I mean, we know exactly what TJ Finley is. I think Holden Gariner will be competing with Robbie Ashford before TJ Finley will.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, you heading to Athens?
Yep, heading to Athens with my boy on Thursday. I just went up to Eastern Kentucky and App State, and they're on spring break right now, and I'm between XFL games, and I rarely get to go, on unofficial visits or things of that nature, and this is kind of new for my son, too, so it's neat. So I'll get a chance to see Kirby and Will and Del McGee, who the running back coach there. He was our starting corner. He was our starting corner in the XFL in 2001.
Incredible. Well, make sure to prepare yourself to eat off the floor if you're in the football building.
Oh, well, dude, I'll lick it clean.
Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds show. See you, Lukes. He joined us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Oh, man. Out of Bounds 105.9 The Zone. ESPN brought to you by the Premium Cigars from Havana Smoke Shop in Jackson, I-55 North, and at the Reservoir across from Shaggy's. Havana Smoke Shop is the place to go in the Jackson Metro for premium cigars like Rocky Patel's and La Flor Dominicanas. And, the San Latano Bull. That's one that I stumbled on the last couple of months. Fantastic cigar at Havana Smoke Shop. Hour number 3 coming up.